That first time he did it, it was probably just by chance. He arrived in Aeneas MacPhail's shop to make his annual purchase, an outfit that consisted of a new black Homburg, a grey coat and shining patent leather shoes. He saw the mannequin there. It was wearing one of the Sabbath specials, a warm dark coat, calf-length skirt, and a blue hat of a kind church-going women have worn here for decades. The kind that Reverend Meikle's late wife, Effie, used to wear Sunday after Sunday, weekday sermon after weekday sermon, for much of their 50-odd years of married life. This resemblance probably started him. The way it stood not far from the shop entrance, looking just as Effie had done so many times before, as if it was hesitating before going out into the rain. It was probably that made him reach for the mannequin's arm, drawing it towards him as he headed out into the dark of winter. "Shoot, Effie," he said, "a little drop of rain won't harm you." A few minutes later and he was off, arm encircling its waist, as they went off down Commerce Street in the direction of his old Austin 1100. He felt he was protecting her from the lash of wind and water the way he'd done years before. She'd always been timid about getting wet, frightened of catching colds, or even the pneumonia that finally killed her. It was the one doubt she never expressed, that the long weave of grey hair she had never cut or shorn, impossible to keep it dry in the rain, she complained. Despite the look of puzzlement fixed on its face, he hurried along. Within a couple of minutes, the old minister had crammed the mannequin into the back of the car. Who knows what happened after that? Maybe he took the mannequin and placed it in his kitchen. Maybe he was chatting to his wife as he prepared dinner. Maybe he was intent on every word. Maybe he was reading scripture to it, conscious only that the figure to which he was speaking was hanging on every one of these words. It was all a very odd experience to him. Since the last secession over the doctrine of the church, no one had listened to him preach. The open Presbyterian church that stood at the end of the village road was crumbling each year into dereliction. For all that, each Sunday he walked along to open it for 5 minutes in the hope someone might turn up. Perhaps that's what gave him the notion. Take it a bit further, lifting a few more mannequins from the empty shop floor of Aeneas MacPhail, visiting to the other local traders, such as David Walker and Omar Iqbal, to see if there were more models he could filch from their shops. He would soon have another congregation within the walls of his own home, one of whom he could share an occasional prayer meeting. Imagine he was conducting baptism, a wedding, even if circumstances dictated a funeral. It was Omar who came to the station to tell us. "I saw this elderly gentleman in an Austin 1100, he said. He had one of our stolen mannequins in the back of the car. He passed a note across the counter. That's its number, just to give you a chance to catch it." It was the sergeant who dialed and dialed after that. He dillied and dallied. He's an old man, never been in trouble in the 80-odd years of his life. He used to be our minister before the split, a fine, kind man, a learned theologian. He sighed and shook his head. Besides, he had heart trouble a couple of years ago. Don't want to bring any more of that in him. Yet a few days later, he had no choice but to act. A phone call came in from Cairnboss, the village he came from. Some woman had seen the lights of the old kirk going on, noticed movements and shadows inside it. "The first time for years," she whispered. The sergeant looked at me. "I think we'd better send someone round." It was strange sitting in the car that evening. McLean and I could glimpse shadows and silhouettes at the kirk windows, bareheaded men, women with an odd variety of hats, perched in the rows of pews. They stared blankly ahead, stiff and immobile, the way the long generations before had sat there, intent on the minister's voice. It was one that we could hear, rising and falling, Reverend Meikle preaching from the book of Isaiah, its pages opened up before him. "The dead shall live, together with my dead body shall they arise. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in dust, for the dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead." "We'd better go," I said to McLean by his side. He nodded, reaching for a torch. We made our way to the kirk, opened the creaking, rusting gate at its door. As we did so, the sounds within the building changed. I shivered, recognizing the Gaelic words echoing through the darkness, the opening lines of the second verse of Psalm 23, the ones about restoring souls and making me to walk. We heaved the door open, its weight creaking and groaning as it shifted. Inside, there was the collection plate on the table, some notes, a dash of silver. We ignored this as we stepped towards the inner church door. The moment my finger slipped over the handle, there was silence inside. I'm at a loss to understand what happened in the church that night. In the pews, there were mannequins, rows and rows of them, both male and female, dressed in the old clothes of both the minister and his wife. In front of them, in all their passivity and stillness, there was Reverend Meikle in the pulpit, his Bible before him. When we went to check his pulse, it was nothing. The touch of his skin, cold. Dr. Morrison, when we called him, said he had been dead for some considerable time before he was found. And yet there was, beyond doubt, both preaching and singing. The music of the Psalms, for which we tried to find some rational explanation. Discovery of a cassette recorder somewhere in the building, a radio broadcasting the Gaelic service. No matter how we searched, there was nothing, only the stillness of these mannequins, only their dead souls.